At my birthday party, my son stood up and announced loudly, "Mom's moving to a care home tomorrow." Everyone went silent. I smiled, stood up, and calmly said, "Before I go, let me show you all something." I opened my bag and pulled out documents. When they saw what was written there, my son's face went white. "Subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin." Laughter in my living room was a solid, warm thing. It filled the spaces between my grandmother's clock on the mantel and the framed photographs lining the bookshelves. I stood by the fireplace, a glass of sparkling cider in my hand, and watched the people I loved move through my home. Beverly was holding court near the piano, her voice a familiar, carrying melody as she recounted some long-ago school trip disaster. The scent of roasted herbs and the rich, sweet icing of my birthday cake lingered in the air. 68 years, and this house held the echo of every one of them. For a moment, I let the simple perfection of it wash over me, the gathered friends, the family, the proof of a life built with intention. My son, Marcus, moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of a financial advisor, which he was. He smiled, shook hands, checked his watch. He had insisted on planning this party himself, handling the caterers, the flowers. "You just relax, Mother," he'd said, a phrase that had become his recent refrain. I watched him now, noting the tightness in his shoulders beneath the expensive suit jacket. He was waiting for something. The signal came when he caught the eye of the server, who began quietly refilling champagne flutes. Marcus picked up a silver knife and tapped it gently against his own glass. The clear ping cut through the conversations. One by one, my friends, my cousins, my few remaining family members turned towards him, faces expectant and smiling. Beverly met my gaze across the room, her eyebrows slightly raised. I gave a small, imperceptible shrug and set my cider down. "Thank you, everyone, for coming to celebrate my mother," Marcus began, his voice projecting with a polished, boardroom confidence. He smiled at me, a wide, fond expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "As you all know, Eleanor St. James is not just any mother. She's a force of nature, a retired principal who shaped generations, a pillar of this community, and the woman who raised me single-handedly after Dad passed." There was a murmur of warm agreement. He was painting the portrait perfectly. The revered elder, the cherished matriarch. I felt a cold knot begin to form in my stomach. This preamble was too elaborate, too publicly sentimental for Marcus. He was a man of spreadsheets and bottom lines, not heartfelt speeches. "But time," he continued, his tone softening into one of grave concern, "has a way of catching up with all of us. And as a son, my greatest priority is my mother's safety, her comfort, and her well-being." He paused, letting the words hang. The room had grown very quiet. Living alone in a big house like this, it's a worry. The stairs, the maintenance, the isolation. I've been losing sleep over it. I did not move. I kept my hands folded in front of me, my posture straight, the way I used to stand at the front of my auditorium. I saw Beverly take a half step forward, her expression shifting from curiosity to alarm. "So after much research and consideration," Marcus announced, his voice rising again with a hint of triumphant conclusion, "I have arranged for the next chapter. As my birthday gift to you, Mother, I am moving you into Golden Years Haven. It's a premier full-care community. They have everything: meal services, social activities, round-the-clock medical staff. You'll be safe. You won't have to lift a finger." He beamed, as if presenting me with a winning lottery ticket. "The paperwork is all settled. We can start packing tomorrow. You're going to love it." A frozen silence slammed down over the room. All the warmth, the laughter, the music of moments before was gone, replaced by a vacuum of shock. Dozens of eyes swiveled from Marcus's pleased face to mine. They were waiting for my reaction, the gasp, the tears, the confused protest of the surprised and cornered elder. I saw pity begin to bloom in some of those looks. Others were just stunned. Marcus kept his smile, confident in the inevitability of his decree. I let the silence stretch for 3 full seconds. I watched the confidence on my son's face start to solidify into something harder, tinged with impatience at my lack of grateful response. Then I moved. I did not slump. I did not cry. I walked to the side table where my simple black handbag sat. The click of the latch was abnormally loud in the hush. I reached inside and withdrew 3 sets of documents, each fastened with a crisp paperclip. I had rehearsed this movement in my mind 100 times. I walked back to the center of the room, my heels making a firm, measured sound on the hardwood. I stopped first before Marcus. His smile had completely vanished, replaced by a bewildered frown. "What's this?" I placed one set of documents in his outstretched hand, which had fallen limp at his side. I did not answer him. I turned and placed the second set into Beverly's waiting grasp. Her fingers closed around the papers like a vice, her eyes blazing with sudden, ferocious understanding. I gave the third set to Margaret Evans, the president of the local historical society and the biggest gossip in 3 counties. She would ensure the truth spread with efficiency. Finally, I turned to face the room. I looked at my son, who was staring dumbly at the top page in his hand. I offered him the same serene, polite smile I had given 1,000 tedious school board members. "Thank you for the toast, Marcus," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying to every corner of the parlor. "But it seems you've made a critical error in your calculations. You don't get to give away what is not and never will be yours." The color drained from his face, leaving it a pale, waxy mask. He looked down at the documents, then back up at me, his mouth slightly agape. The room remained in absolute stillness, but the energy had shifted. The pity was gone, replaced by a sharp, collective intake of breath. The hunt was over, but the hunter had just discovered he was the prey. And I had been waiting for this moment since the first time he'd asked, too casually, about the terms of my will. The rustle of paper in Marcus's hands was the only sound. He stared down at the first page, his eyes scanning the lines. I watched as his expression moved from confusion to dawning comprehension, and then to a pure, bloodless shock. His knuckles whitened around the edges of the documents. What is this?" he asked again, his voice a dry rasp, lacking all its previous authority. "I believe it is called reading, dear," I said, my tone even. "You should try it sometime before you sign things, or have other people sign them." A low murmur began to ripple through the room. Guests leaned towards each other, whispering. Their eyes were no longer on me with pity, but on Marcus with sharp curiosity. Margaret Evans had her reading glasses perched on her nose and was already flipping through the pages, her lips moving silently. Beverly broke the tension. She held up her copy, her voice clear and commanding, a former teacher seizing the classroom's attention. "Shall I, Aliner, for those who might need a summary?" I gave a slight nod. "Please do, Beverly." She cleared her throat. "This first document," she announced, projecting so even the caterers in the kitchen doorway could hear, "is a fully executed contract of sale. Dated and signed 1 week ago. It details the sale of the property at 2147 Willow Lane, this house, from Aliner Rosalind St. James to the Crestwood Community Land Trust." She paused, letting the words sink in. "The sale is final. The closing was completed this past Tuesday." A collective gasp went up. Marcus made a small choking sound. You sold the house." He looked around the living room, the walls, the fireplace, as if they had already vanished. "I did," I confirmed. "The land trust will maintain it as affordable housing for young teachers in the district. A fitting use, I thought." Beverly continued, her finger tracing down the page. "The second document is an amendment to a revocable living trust, also dated and notarized last week." She looked directly at Marcus. "It states that Marcus Allen St. James is hereby removed as primary beneficiary and successor trustee. His authority as power of attorney for healthcare and finances is revoked, effective immediately." She flipped a page. "A new trustee has been appointed. The estate's assets, upon the grantor's passing, are to be liquidated and directed into 2 charitable funds. The Aliner St. James Future Educators Scholarship and the St. James Community Garden Endowment." The silence now was absolute. You could hear the soft tick of my grandmother's clock on the mantel. Every face in the room was a study in stunned revelation. The narrative had been flipped entirely. I was not the vulnerable mother being shipped away. I was the executive who had just liquidated her chief liability and restructured her legacy. Marcus finally found his voice, but it was cracked and weak. "You can't, this is, Mother, what have you done? Who manipulated you into this?" He took a step toward me, the papers trembling in his hand. "This is clearly the result of undue influence. This is not legally sound. It is perfectly sound, Marcus, I said. I did not step back. It was prepared by Franklin Daniels. I believe you remember him. He handled your father's will. He was quite surprised to learn you had been shopping for estate lawyers yourself, asking about the process for declaring a person incompetent to manage their affairs. He found that particularly curious, as you had never mentioned any such concerns to me. Another wave of murmurs, darker this time, washed through the guests. The word incompetent hung in the air like a foul smell. Marcus's face flushed a deep, mottled red. I was exploring options. For your protection, this is a betrayal. He gestured wildly with the documents. You betrayed your own family. No, I said, and for the first time I let a sliver of ice enter my voice. I protected myself from a hostile takeover. You announced my relocation and the effective seizure of my major asset at a party, in front of an audience, assuming I would be too polite or too shocked to resist. That was your error. You mistook manners for weakness. I looked away from him, addressing the room. My friends, my colleagues, my community. I apologize for the drama at this gathering. It was not my intention, but it seems my son's birthday gift required a reciprocal gesture. My gift is clarity. I am not, nor will I be, a resident of Golden Years Haven. I have, however, secured an apartment at the Laurels, an independent living community downtown. I move in tomorrow. This house, I said, placing my hand on the back of my own armchair, belongs to the future now, not to any one person's balance sheet. Beverly was grinning, a fierce, proud smile. Margaret Evans was nodding slowly, a look of profound satisfaction on her face. The other guests' expressions had transformed. The pity was gone, replaced by a new respect and a distinct coldness toward Marcus, who stood isolated in the center of the room. He seemed to shrink inside his expensive suit. The arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind a shell of bewildered humiliation. He looked at the papers in his hand, then at the faces around him, all watching him. He saw no allies there. "You've ruined everything," he whispered, but the words were meant for me. "I have corrected a critical error," I replied. "You made plans for my life without my consent. I have simply implemented better ones. The difference is I own my plans." The party did not resume. The festive atmosphere was irreparably broken, shattered by the seismic shift in the room's power structure. People began to move, gathering coats and handbags, but they came to me first. They took my hands, not with condolence, but with a firm, knowing pressure. "Good for you, Aliner," my old neighbor, Mr. Peterson, said. "Should have known you'd have the final word." A former student, now a city councilwoman, hugged me and murmured, "Principal St. James is still teaching lessons, I see." Marcus did not approach me again. He stood by the fireplace, staring into the empty grate, the documents crumpled in his fist. He was waiting for the crowd to clear, to avoid further public scrutiny. I watched him from across the room as I accepted the quiet congratulations of my friends. His posture was defeated. The planner had not planned for this. The son who thought he held all the cards had just discovered his mother was playing an entirely different game. And she had already checked his king. The last of the guests had left with a final, supportive squeeze of my hand or a meaningful nod. The caterers cleared the remains of the uneaten cake and the half-full champagne flutes with silent efficiency. Beverly stayed, of course. She helped me gather the discarded napkins and empty glasses, her presence a steady comfort. Marcus had left 20 minutes prior, without a word, simply walking out the front door, the crumpled legal documents still in his hand. The house was quiet again, but the silence now was different. It was not peaceful. It was charged with the aftermath of detonation. Beverly put the last glass on the kitchen counter. "He'll need time to process that," she said, her voice matter of fact. "He'll need time to consult a lawyer to see if he can undo it," I corrected, running a dishcloth over the spotless countertop. The action was mechanical, a way to settle my nerves. The confrontation was over, but the adrenaline still hummed in my veins. That will be his next move. Franklin Daniels is the best. He won't find a crack. I know. She came to stand beside me, leaning against the counter. "When did you know? Really know?" I looked out the kitchen window into the dark backyard. The answer was not a single moment, but a series of small, cold realizations that had accreted over months, like layers of frost on a window pane. It began, I suppose, with what he called his helpfulness. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early spring, 3 months before the party. Marcus had started visiting more frequently, always with a purpose. That day, he arrived with a new financial software program downloaded on his tablet. "I want to help you get organized, Mom," he said, setting up at the kitchen table. "Your files are probably a mess. Dad, been gone 10 years. Things need streamlining." I had made tea. I placed a cup in front of him. "My files are adequate. I pay my bills on time. My taxes are filed." "But are you optimized?" he asked, using that corporate word. "With interest rates and the market, your assets could be working harder for you. Let me just take a look." It felt intrusive, but he framed it as concern, as a son's duty. I relented, retrieving the file box from my study that held statements for my pension, my investment account from Robert's life insurance, the deed to the house, the utility bills. I watched as he photographed each document with his tablet, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This pension is solid," he murmured, "and the investment account good balance, and the house." He looked up, a calculated smile on his face. "Do you know what this place is worth now? The market in this neighborhood has exploded. It's your biggest asset by far." "It's my home," I said. "Its value on paper is irrelevant." "It's not irrelevant," he said, his tone gently chiding, as if I were a child not understanding a math problem. "It's leverage, it's security, but it's also a liability. The roof is 20 years old, the property taxes alone." He continued his inventory. A week later, he was back. The helpfulness had evolved. "You know, to make things easier for you, if you ever got sick, God forbid, we should think about a power of attorney. Just a durable financial POA. It would let me help manage things so you wouldn't have to worry." I stirred my soup on the stove. "I am not worried, Marcus, and I am not sick." "It's about planning, Mom, being proactive. Everyone should have one. I have one. It's just responsible." The phrase, being proactive, had come from his lips often lately. It began to sound less like advice and more like an agenda. The following visit, he brought takeout. Over Chinese food, he was casual, almost offhand. "Have you given any more thought to your will? I know Dad's old one left everything to you, then to me, but we should update it. Make sure it's ironclad. With the value of the estate now, we need to think about tax implications, about probate." I put my chopsticks down. "My will is my private affair." "I'm your only heir, Mom. It's my affair, too." He said it with a light laugh, but his eyes were serious. "I just want to make sure you're protected and that everything goes smoothly, for both of us." That was the first time I felt a distinct chill. The phrase, "for both of us," seemed to hang in the air between the cardboard containers. His protection and his smooth inheritance were becoming entwined in his narrative. The questions grew more specific. Did I have a safe deposit box? Where was the key? Was my investment account Todd transfer on death to him? Had I considered the benefits of putting the house in a trust to avoid estate taxes? He mentioned, twice, how stressful it must be for me to manage the house's upkeep alone. Then came the brochures. He left them on the coffee table after a visit. "Golden Years Haven, a new chapter in luxury care." The booklet was glossy, filled with pictures of smiling seniors playing bridge and eating in elegant dining rooms. A sticky note was attached to the cover. "Just for you to browse, no pressure. Their security and amenities are top-notch. Think about it." I did not browse it. I placed it in the recycling bin, but his campaign was clear. He was constructing a reality. I was aging, my home was a burden, my finances were inefficient, and my judgment might soon be compromised. He was the solution to all these manufactured problems. The final, logical step was for him to take control, for my own good. The party announcement was not a spontaneous gift. It was the planned culmination of this soft-pressure campaign. He must have believed he had gently, patiently guided me to the edge of that cliff, and all he had to do was give me a small, public nudge. I turned from the window to face Beverly. The memory of those months solidified the resolve that had momentarily softened after his departure. I knew for certain the day he brought the brochure, I said, my voice flat. But I suspected the moment he started photographing my financial statements. He wasn't organizing them. He was conducting an audit. Beverly nodded slowly. And you started your own audit? I did. I made an appointment with Franklin the next morning. I looked around the kitchen, the scene of those careful, probing conversations. He thought he was being so subtle, so clever, but he forgot who taught him to think ahead. Every move he made was a lesson I'd already written the curriculum for. Beverly left around 10 after extracting a promise that I would call her first thing in the morning. The house was profoundly still. I turned off the lights, one by one, moving through the rooms that were no longer mine. The silence felt different now, not empty but purposeful. It was the quiet of a stage after the actors have left, the set being struck. I knew what I had to do next because I had already done it 10 weeks earlier. The memory of that first decisive step was what allowed me to walk calmly up the stairs to my bedroom that night, while the ghost of my son's shocked face still hovered in the parlor below. 2 days after Marcus left the brochure on my coffee table, I called Franklin Daniels' office. His secretary, who had known me for 30 years, put me right through. "Eleanor," his warm, familiar voice came down the line. "It's been too long. How are you?" "I am well, Franklin, but I require a professional consultation. Are you available?" The slight pause told me he heard the formal note in my voice, the one I used for serious matters. "Of course, tomorrow at 2. That would be perfect." His office was in a quiet brick building downtown, the same one Robert and I had visited to sign our wills a lifetime ago. The waiting room had the same leather chairs, the same print of a sailing ship on the wall. It smelled of lemon polish and old paper. It was a place where decisions were made, not emotions felt. I appreciated that. Franklin himself met me at the door to his inner office. He was older, his hair fully white now, but his handshake was firm, his eyes as kind and sharp as ever. He gestured me to a chair facing his large, orderly desk. "Now," he said, settling into his own chair. "What can I help you with, Eleanor? Estate planning review." "In a manner of speaking," I said. I placed my hands flat on my knees. "My son Marcus has recently become very involved in my affairs. He has audited my finances, suggested powers of attorney, and has begun to strongly recommend I move into a full-care facility called Golden Years Haven." I kept my voice neutral, stating facts. Franklin's expression grew still professional. "I see, and your feelings on this?" "I have no wish to move. I am capable. My finances are in order. His enthusiasm concerns me. He has also asked detailed questions about my will and the value of my house. He mentioned the need to update things to be ironclad." Franklin leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Has he contacted any other legal or financial professionals, to your knowledge?" "I do not know, but I suspect he may be exploring options. He used the phrase being proactive." A faint frown crossed Franklin's face. "That is a troubling pattern, Eleanor. It suggests he may be laying groundwork. The next step in such a scenario is often a petition for conservatorship, what used to be called guardianship, arguing that you are no longer able to manage your own affairs. The move to a care facility would be presented as evidence of the need." The word conservatorship landed in the room with a cold, heavy weight. It was the legal term for what I had feared, being declared incompetent. A shiver of something that was not quite fear, but profound violation, passed through me. I had managed a school, a household, a life. The idea of my own child reducing me to a ward of the state was an obscenity. "Can he do that?" I asked, my voice remaining level. "He can file a petition," Franklin said carefully. "The court would require medical evaluations, a hearing. It is invasive, stressful, and costly. Even if unsuccessful, it leaves a stain. The best defense is a powerful offense. You must act before any such notions solidify in his mind." "What does that offense look like?" He opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh legal pad. "First, we solidify your autonomy in legally unassailable ways. We execute updated powers of attorney, naming someone other than Marcus, a trusted friend, a professional fiduciary. We document your capacity. I can refer you to a neurologist for a full cognitive assessment now to establish a clear baseline of your competence. That report would be a formidable shield. I nodded. Beverly Carter for the powers of attorney. Excellent. Second, we remove the primary motivator. You said he is focused on the house. He calls it my biggest asset. He is correct. Then we remove it from the equation of your estate, Franklin said, his pen poised. You could sell it. You could gift it. You could place it in an irrevocable trust with specific, non-family beneficiaries. Once it is out of your direct ownership, it ceases to be a liquid asset he can anticipate controlling or selling for your care. The idea was staggering, to voluntarily let go of my home, but as he said it, I felt not loss but a surge of strategic clarity. He was right. The house was the trophy. If it was gone, the entire purpose of his campaign collapsed. Selling it would be simplest, I said, thinking aloud, but I would need somewhere to go. There are many excellent independent living communities, he offered, or a smaller apartment. The key is that you choose it, you control the transaction, and you use the proceeds to fund your own chosen future, not one imposed on you. And my will, the other assets. We restructure everything, he said, a note of quiet steel in his voice. We create a new, irrevocable trust. We remove Marcus as beneficiary and executor. We designate charities, causes you believe in. We make it clear in binding legal language that this is your deliberate, considered wish, made while you are of sound mind and body. We leave no room for him to argue you were confused or influenced later. We do it now. He looked at me across the desk. This is a significant course of action, Alina. It will likely sever your relationship with your son, at least for a time. You must be certain. I thought of the brochures, the pointed questions about my will, the spreadsheet evaluation of my life's sanctuary. I thought of the party he was undoubtedly planning, where he would unveil his solution to the problem of me. I saw the path he was building, and I saw where it ended, with me in a comfortable room and him with the keys to my kingdom. I am certain, I said. I do not wish to be a problem he feels he must solve. I will solve it for him, permanently. Franklin nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. Then we have a plan. I will draft the documents. The cognitive assessment should be scheduled immediately. We will also need to identify a buyer for the house, one that aligns with your wishes. Do you have any preferences? I did. The idea came fully formed, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The Crestwood Community Land Trust. They preserve affordable housing. I would like the house to help a young teacher or a nurse, someone who needs the stability my husband and I built here. A slow smile spread across Franklin's face. A fine choice, a legacy rather than just a sale. He made a note. This will take a few weeks to coordinate. Absolute discretion is essential. I understand. I stood up, feeling a new solidity in my bones. The fear was gone, replaced by the clean, sharp focus of a plan. I was no longer a potential victim awaiting a decree. I was a client issuing instructions. Thank you, Franklin. It is my honor, Alina, he said, rising to see me out. Robert would be proud of you, and frankly, so am I. Walking out of his office into the afternoon sun, I felt a sense of calm I had not known in months. The law was not an abstract force. It was a tool. My son had thought to use it as a scalpel to remove me from my own life. I would use it as a shield, and then as a sword to reclaim it. The battle had not yet been joined, but I had just secured the high ground. The clarity I felt after leaving Franklin's office was not euphoric. It was surgical. I had a list of tasks, a sequence of actions. The first was to secure my new residence. I did not look at brochures for places like Golden Years Haven. Instead, I made discreet inquiries through former colleagues and found the Laurels. It was an independent living community, not a care facility. The apartments were owned, not rented. There were no nurses' stations in the halls, only a concierge and a calendar of voluntary activities. I toured a 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor with a view of a small, manicured park. The kitchen was compact but full-sized. The walls were plain, awaiting personal touches. It was not my home, but it was a space I could claim as my own, on my terms. I wrote a check for the down payment that afternoon. The second task was to tell Beverly. I could not execute this plan alone, and she was the only person I trusted without reservation. I invited her for tea 2 days after my meeting with Franklin, under the pretext of needing her opinion on some financial papers. She arrived promptly at 3, her curiosity evident. We sat in the sunlit parlor, the same room that would later host my birthday debacle. I poured the tea, Earl Grey, into my good china cups. The normality of the ritual was important. "So," Beverly said, accepting her cup, "what financial papers are so mysterious you couldn't describe them on the phone?" "They are not mysterious. They are definitive." I reached for the manila folder on the side table and placed it on the coffee table between us. "Franklin Daniels drafted them. I have signed them. The process is already in motion." Her playful expression faded into one of serious attention. She set her cup down. "Tell me." "Marcus is planning to have me declared incompetent. He intends to move me into a full-care home and take control of my assets, primarily this house." I stated it as the fact I now knew it to be. Beverly's face hardened. "That little weasel, I knew his sudden helpfulness was foul. What are you going to do?" "I am not going to fight him," I said. "I am going to preempt him. I am rendering his entire strategy obsolete." I opened the folder. "This is a contract of sale. I am selling this house to the Crestwood Community Land Trust. The closing is scheduled for 6 weeks from now. They will convert it into affordable housing for essential workers." Beverly's eyes widened. She blinked, then a slow, fierce smile began to form. "You're selling the trophy out from under him." "Precisely. Without the house as a primary asset, his financial justification for a conservatorship evaporates." I slid the next document toward her. "This is a deed to an apartment at the Laurels. I have purchased it. I move in the day after the house closing." She picked up the paper, examining it. "The Laurels, that's a good place. My cousin Ruth lives there. She loves it. It's just an apartment building. No bells and whistles." "Exactly. It is my choice, not his solution." I took a sip of tea. "The final piece is here." I tapped the last, thickest document. "A restated, irrevocable trust. It removes Marcus as beneficiary and executor. It appoints you as my healthcare proxy and durable power of attorney. Upon my death, the remainder of my estate, the proceeds from the house sale after I purchase the apartment, my investments, will fund 2 charitable trusts, a scholarship for future educators and an endowment for a community garden." Beverly was silent for a long moment, reading the summary page. When she looked up, her eyes were bright. "Eleanor, this is magnificent. It's a complete scorched earth policy, on your own terms." Then her expression softened with concern. "He will be furious. This will break any relationship you have left." "The relationship he is offering is that of a warden to a prisoner," I said, my voice cool. "I am declining that offer. If a relationship is to exist after this, it will be on a foundation of respect, not control. This," I said, gesturing to the documents, "establishes the new foundation. It is non-negotiable." "What do you need from me?" she asked, her voice now all business. "I need you to be my witness, my ally. I need you to sign as the successor trustee and power of attorney. And," I said, meeting her gaze, "I need you to be with me at the birthday party." "He's throwing you a party." "He is. He will use it as the stage for his announcement. He will present the move to Golden Years Haven as a asterisk fait accompli asterisk, counting on social pressure to make me comply." Beverly's lips thinned. "The bastard." "So I will use his stage for my announcement. When he makes his toast, I will produce these documents. I will hand him his copy. I will hand you yours, and I will give one to Margaret Evans." At that, Beverly barked a laugh. "Margaret, of course, the town crier, he'll be a pariah by dawn." "That is not my primary goal," I said, though I acknowledged the utility of it. "My goal is public, legal clarity. He must understand in front of everyone we know that I am not a subject to be managed. I have managed myself. This is the proof." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was strong. "I am in, 100%. This is the most brilliant thing you've ever done, and I've seen you do plenty." We spent the next hour going over details. We coordinated with Franklin on the timing. ensuring all documents would be fully executed and recorded before the party. We planned how to securely move my selected belongings to the new apartment in a single day. Beverly insisted on being the point person for the movers. We discussed what to say, and more importantly, what not to say, in the weeks leading up to the party. I had to act normally, to give Marcus no hint that his trap had been discovered and dismantled before he even sprang it. As she was leaving, Beverly turned to me on the porch. "You're really at peace with this, leaving this house?" I looked back through the front door, into the hall where my children's height markings were still faintly visible on the doorframe. "I am leaving a building. I am taking my life with me. The peace comes from that distinction. He wanted to take the life and leave me in the building. I have simply reversed the terms." She nodded, understanding. "Then I'll see you for bridge on Thursday, and we act like nothing is happening." Exactly. After she drove away, I went back inside. The house felt different already. It was no longer a possession to be fought over. It was an asset in transition. Every room, every piece of furniture was being mentally cataloged. Keep, donate, discard. The sentimentality was being methodically drained away, replaced by logistics. The emotion would come later, I knew, in private moments. But for now, the plan was a cold engine, and I was its operator. The tea was finished, the strategy set. All that remained was the waiting, and then the flawless execution. The weeks between that tea with Beverly and the birthday party passed with a strange duality. Publicly, I was the slightly weary, grateful mother, accepting my son's help with a smile. Privately, I was a project manager overseeing the quiet dismantling of his ambitions. Franklin's office handled the cognitive assessment, which I passed with what the neurologist called exceptional clarity. The sale to the Crestwood Land Trust proceeded on schedule, the paperwork signed in a conference room with no fanfare. The deed to my apartment at the Laurels was recorded. The new, irrevocable trust was executed and filed. Every T was crossed, every I dotted by Franklin's meticulous hand. The trap was not the one Marcus was building. It was the one he was walking into, completely unaware. Now, in the frozen silence of my living room after my initial statement, the trap was sprung. All eyes were on Beverly as she held the documents aloft, her voice a clear, judicial instrument in the hush. "This first document," she repeated for emphasis, "is a contract of sale, executed 1 week ago. The seller is Alina St. James. The buyer is the Crestwood Community Land Trust. The sale is unconditional and closed." She looked directly at Marcus. "The house is no longer your mother's asset. It is no longer part of her estate. It belongs to the trust, which will convert it into affordable housing." Marcus seemed to physically deflate. He stared at the paper in his own hand as if it were written in a foreign language. You had no right," he stammered, but the accusation was weak, aimed at a legal fact he could not dispute. "I had every right," I stated calmly. "It is my property, was my property." Beverly continued, turning the page. "The second document is the restated Alina R. St. James Irrevocable Trust." She read the pertinent clauses with deliberate pace. Clause 4.1. "The grantor hereby revokes any and all prior designations of Marcus Allen St. James as beneficiary or successor trustee." Clause 4.2. "The grantor appoints Beverly Carter as successor trustee and durable power of attorney for healthcare and finances, effective upon grantor's incapacity, as determined by 2 independent physicians." She glanced up, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. "That would be me, Marcus, not you." A low murmur of astonishment went through the crowd. Margaret Evans was nodding vigorously, pointing to a line on her copy and whispering to the person beside her. "Clause 7, Beverly pressed on, her voice gaining strength. "Distribution of trust corpus upon grantor's death. The remaining assets shall be liquidated. The proceeds shall be divided equally to fund 2 charitable entities. The Alina St. James Future Educators Scholarship Fund, to be administered by the school district, and the St. James Community Garden Endowment, to be managed by the City Parks Department." She lowered the papers. "There is no provision for individual inheritance. The trust is irrevocable. It cannot be altered." The finality of that word, irrevocable, seemed to suck the remaining air from the room. Marcus's face was a mask of utter disbelief. The financial advisor in him understood immediately the sheer, immovable finality of what he was hearing. The house gone, the inheritance gone, the control gone, all of it transformed into charitable instruments that would outlive him, carrying my name, not his. This is malicious, he breathed, his voice cracking. He looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes. Mother, this is madness. Those are my funds too, my legacy. Your legacy, I said, my tone cutting through his protest, was to be the son who cared for his mother. You chose to define that as removing me from my home and controlling my money. You crafted a legacy of condescension and greed. I have simply chosen a different one for myself, one of autonomy and of contribution. The guests were no longer looking at me with concern. They were looking at Marcus with dawning comprehension and cold judgment. The pieces were falling into place for them. The sudden helpfulness, the party, the announcement. They saw now that my calm was not shock, but preparedness. That my documents were not a hysterical reaction, but a calculated, premeditated counterstrike. A man from my book club, a retired judge, spoke up, his voice dry. An irrevocable trust is a powerful tool, Marcus. It represents the settled intent of the grantor. It's about as solid as the law allows. Another guest, a woman who had served with me on the school board, added, A community land trust is a wonderful beneficiary, Alina. It will do real good. The social consensus was shifting palpably in the room. The narrative was rewritten. I was not a victim, I was a benefactor. He was not a caring son, he was a thwarted opportunist. Marcus heard it. He saw the change in their faces, the withdrawal of sympathy. His humiliation was now public, social, and absolute. It was one thing to be outmaneuvered legally. It was another to be exposed morally in front of the entire community that had known him since he was a boy. His credibility, his standing, was evaporating by the second. He took a step back, as if physically pushed by the collective gaze. The crumpled documents fell from his hand, fluttering to the floor. He didn't seem to notice. He was looking at me, but I think he was finally seeing me, not as his mother, a role defined by his needs, but as Alina St. James, a separate legal and moral entity who had just exercised her sovereignty in the most comprehensive way possible. You planned this, he said, not a question but a stunned realization. You knew what I was going to say. I anticipated the move you have been telegraphing for months, I corrected. There is a difference. I did not create this conflict, Marcus. You did. I have merely defined its terms. And the terms are these: I am moving, but to a home I chose. I am securing my future, but on a foundation I poured. You are welcome to visit me there, but you will do so as a guest in my home, not as the manager of my life. The room was utterly silent, waiting for his response. He had none. The script he had written, in which he was the heroic son making tough decisions, was in ashes. The new script, written by me and now read aloud by Beverly, cast him in a role he never imagined, the antagonist who lost. He turned on his heel wordlessly and walked out of the living room. A moment later, we heard the front door open and close with a soft, definitive click. The party was over. The battle was won. The documents had been explained. And in their stark, legal language, they had not just protected my future. They had etched my son's miscalculation into the permanent record of our family history, witnessed by everyone who mattered. The soft click of the front door was not an ending. It was an intermission. The guests remained frozen in the living room, a tableau of shock and reassessment. The legal facts had been stated, but the human aftermath was just beginning. I could feel their eyes on me again, but the quality of their attention had changed once more. It was no longer about the documents. It was about the man who had just walked out and the mother who had made him leave. I stood perfectly still, my hands at my sides. The cold, tactical clarity that had carried me through the reveal was now giving way to something else, a rising, thermal heat of a more personal anger. It had been contained for months, banked and controlled for the sake of strategy. Now, with the strategy executed, it demanded an outlet. I heard the door open again, heavy footsteps in the foyer. Marcus reappeared in the archway, his face a storm of humiliation and dawning rage. He had not gone to his car. He had merely stepped outside to gather himself, and the gathering had turned to fury. You humiliated me, he said, his voice low and thick. In front of everyone, you planned to humiliate me. You announced my institutionalization at my own birthday party, Marcus, I replied, my voice still level, though I could feel a tremor wanting to enter it. You intended to use this crowd to pressure me into compliance. That was your plan. My response was a correction of the record. A correction? He spat, taking a step into the room. The guests drew back slightly, giving him a wide berth. You call stealing my inheritance a correction asterisk. You've been manipulated. By Beverly, by that lawyer. You're not thinking clearly. That was the trigger. The months of his patronizing concern, the subtle suggestions that my judgment was slipping, the entire architecture of his condescension, collapsed in on me. The heat I felt crystallized into a sharp, cold point. Do not, I said, and this time my voice did not stay level. It rose, clear and commanding, the voice I had used in school auditoriums to silence hundreds of students. It cut through the room. Do not ever question my clarity again. You who came into my home and photographed my financial statements without asking. You who began every sentence with "for your safety," while your eyes were calculating the value of my ceilings. You who left brochures for a locked facility on my coffee table. He flinched as if struck. I was concerned. You were conducting a feasibility study, I fired back. The dam was broken now, and the truth I had quietly cataloged came pouring out. You audited my life. You assessed the asset. You planned the liquidation. The only thing you failed to do was inform the asset of the plan, until tonight. That's not true. Is it? I took a step toward him. The guests were statues, witnessing a verdict being delivered. 3 months ago, you asked for power of attorney. 2 months ago, you asked detailed questions about the probate process and estate taxes. 6 weeks ago, you told me the roof was a liability and the property taxes were a burden. You systematically devalued my home and my mind so your solution would seem inevitable. And then you secured the solution. Golden Years Haven. How much research did you do, Marcus? Did you get a brochure, or did you get a referral agreement? The room gasped. Margaret Evans's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus's face went blank with shock. What are you implying? I am stating a question, I said, my voice dropping back into a terrifying calm. These facilities often have financial incentives for family members who place residents. Did you inquire about a referral fee, Marcus? Was your concern going to be monetized? The color drained from his face completely. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His silence was more damning than any denial. My anger crested then, not in a shout, but in a wave of profound, devastating disappointment. You reduced me to a line item. You saw my independence as a problem to be solved, my home as equity to be captured, and my love for you as a vulnerability to be exploited. You did not see me. You saw a depreciating asset and an appreciating house, and you thought you could manage the transfer between the two without my noticing. Tears, not of sadness, but of pure, furious betrayal, stung my eyes. I did not wipe them away. I let them be seen. You asked me to trust you with my life while you were secretly consulting lawyers about how to declare me unfit to live it. That is not love. That is a hostile takeover. And tonight, the board of directors voted you out. He stood there, exposed. My words hung in the air, precise and unanswerable. I had detailed his campaign, motive by motive, action by action. There was no rebuttal that wouldn't sound like a confession. The guests' faces showed they believed every word. The last of his social capital evaporated. His shoulders slumped. The fight left him, replaced by a hollowed-out shame. I was trying to do what was best, he muttered, but the phrase was ashes now. No, I said, finality in the word. You were trying to do what was most convenient and most profitable for you. You wrapped it in concern, but the packaging was transparent. I am your mother. I changed your diapers. I know when you are lying. He looked around the room at the averted eyes, the stern faces. He had no allies here. The performance was over, and the audience had turned on the actor. Without another word, he turned again and walked out. This time, his steps were slower, heavier. The front door closed again, this time with a sense of permanence. The silence he left behind was deep, but not uncomfortable. It was the silence after a necessary storm. Beverly came to my side, putting a steadying hand on my arm. I did not lean on her. I stood straight, the emotional release leaving me emptied but not weak. I had said what needed to be said, not for the crowd, but for myself, for the record of my own heart. I looked at the faces of my friends, my community. I saw no judgment of me. I saw sympathy, yes, but also a firm, unwavering respect. They had seen the truth, and they had seen me defend it. "I am sorry you all had to witness that," I said, my voice regaining its evenness. "The party, I fear, is quite over." It was the retired judge who spoke first. "Nothing to apologize for, Aliner. Sometimes the truth needs a public hearing. You conducted it with dignity." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. The confrontation was done. The motives were laid bare. The victory in the living room was now complete, not just legally, but morally. He had been seen and known for what he was. And I had been seen and known for what I am, not a victim, but a sovereign person. The anger receded, leaving behind a clean, quiet exhaustion and the certain knowledge that I would never have to have that particular argument again. The guests left not long after, their goodbyes quiet and weighted with unspoken understanding. They took the remnants of the party with them, along with the story they would now tell. Beverly stayed to help me clear the final plates, but we worked in a comfortable silence. There was nothing left to strategize. The plan was now reality. We had won. The word felt strange in my mind, not triumphant, but conclusive. At 8 the next morning, I was already awake, dressed in practical slacks and a cotton shirt. The house felt different in the daylight. The emotional charge of the previous night had dissipated, leaving behind the physical fact of a space that was no longer mine. Sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the dust motes that my cleaning would usually have suppressed. Today, I would not be cleaning. I would be dismantling. Beverly arrived at 8:30, carrying a cardboard tray with 2 coffee cups and a bag of pastries. "Fuel," she said, handing me a cup. She looked around the living room, which still held the ghostly arrangement of last night's chairs. "Where do we start?" "The study," I said. "The personal items. The movers will handle the furniture this afternoon, but I need to decide what travels with me." We carried our coffee into the small room that had been my sanctuary for 30 years. The bookshelves were the hardest. I ran my fingers along the spines, textbooks from my teaching years, novels I'd loved, Robert's collection of history books. I had already made a list. I pointed to 2 small boxes on the floor. "These are for the new apartment. The rest will be donated to the library's annual sale." Beverly began pulling books, checking them against my list. She didn't ask about each one. She understood this was not a time for nostalgia, but for triage. "Are you all right?" she asked after a while, her voice soft. I paused, holding a faded copy of To Kill a Mockingbird I had used to teach 9th graders. "I am processing," I said, which was the most accurate word. "There is sadness, for him, for the relationship he chose to discard. There is relief, and there is purpose. The purpose is the largest feeling right now. It makes the others manageable." She nodded. "That's the Aliner I know. Always finds the lesson plan in the chaos." We worked through the morning. Photographs came out of frames. I placed the ones of Robert, of my parents, of Marcus as a boy, into a special portfolio. The formal portraits, the generic landscapes, went into a discard pile. I took my grandmother's clock from the mantel, carefully wrapping it in bubble wrap. I packed my good china, the set my mother had given me, but left the everyday dishes in the cabinets for the next occupant. The movers arrived at 1 o'clock, 2 efficient men from a company Franklin had recommended. I showed them the floor plan of my new apartment, with pieces of tape marking where each item of furniture should go. The large bedroom set, the dining table, the heavy armchair from the study, they would go to the new place. The living room sofa, the extra beds, the bulkier bookcases, I had sold them to a second-hand store. The house needed to be empty by the end of the day for the land trust's inspection. Watching the men wrap and carry my things was surreal. It was the physical unmooring of my life from this place. Each piece that left the room created an empty space on the floor, a lighter echo in the house. It was not a violent process, but a deliberate one. I had authorized every removal. In the early afternoon, I went upstairs to my bedroom for the last time. The movers had already taken the bed frame and dresser. Only the nightstand remained, along with a single lamp. The afternoon sun poured across the bare floorboards, illuminating the spots where rugs had lain for decades. I could see the faint scuff marks near the closet door. I stood in the center of the room, listening to the hollow sounds from downstairs. This was the room where I had grieved Robert, where I had worried over parent-teacher conferences, where I had listened for Marcus's car to come home safely as a teenager. The memories were layered in the walls, but they were mine to take with me. The walls themselves were just plaster and paint, soon to shelter someone else's dreams and worries. Beverly appeared in the doorway. "They're loading the last of the designated furniture. Your personal boxes are in my car. The apartment manager is expecting the movers by 4. "Thank you," I said. I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard, at the old oak tree whose leaves were just beginning to turn. I planted that tree the spring after Robert died. Marcus helped. He was 12. He thought it was too small to ever matter. "It's a fine tree now," Beverly said, coming to stand beside me. "It is. It will be here long after I'm gone. That seems right." I turned from the window. There was nothing left to do in this room. I picked up the lamp, unplugged it, and carried it out. Beverly took the nightstand. We did a final walkthrough. The rooms echoed with our footsteps. The house was a shell now, clean and vacant, waiting for its next chapter. It looked larger and somehow younger without the accumulation of a lifetime. I felt no overwhelming grief. I felt a respectful farewell. I had loved this house, and now I was letting it go, not because I was forced to, but because I chose to. That was the essential difference. I locked the front door for the last time and placed the key in the pre-addressed envelope to mail to the Land Trust office. Beverly drove, my car already packed and waiting at the Laurels. I did not look back as we pulled away from the curb. I looked forward down the street, toward the main road that led across town. "You're sure?" Beverly asked, though she knew the answer. "I am sure," I said. "He wanted to move me into a future he controlled. I have moved myself into a future I own. The address is different. The balance of power is fundamentally and permanently altered." I looked at my hands, resting in my lap. They were dry from packing, but steady. That is enough. That is everything. We drove the rest of the way in a peaceful silence. The physical work was done. The legal work was done. The emotional reckoning with Marcus was done. All that remained was to walk into the new space and begin the process of making it a home. The packing had been an act of purpose. The unpacking would be an act of freedom. The new apartment held the quiet of a sanctuary. A week had passed since the move. Each morning, I made coffee in my compact kitchen and took it to the small table by the window that looked over the park. I watched people walk their dogs. I read the newspaper. The silence was not empty. It was full of my own choosing. I had arranged my books on the shelves, hung my favorite paintings, and placed my grandmother's clock on a sideboard where it ticked softly. It was not the home of my past, but it was distinctly, comfortably mine. The absence of conflict was a tangible relief, like a persistent noise that had finally stopped. I was sorting through a box of linens on the third afternoon when the intercom buzzed. I walked to the panel by the door. "Yes." "Mrs. St. James, it's Marcus. I'd like to come up if you'll see me." His voice was subdued. There was no demand in it, only a request. I paused, my hand resting on the cool plastic of the intercom. I had expected a legal letter before a personal visit. This was unexpected. "You may come up," I said, and pressed the button to unlock the building's front door. I did not rush to tidy the apartment. I closed the linen box and pushed it against the wall. I smoothed my sweater and waited. A minute later, a soft knock sounded. I opened the door. He stood in the hallway, looking smaller somehow. He wore a simple polo shirt and khakis, not one of his sharp suits. He held a small potted orchid in his hands, its white blooms delicate. His eyes were tired. "May I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. "Yes." He entered, his gaze taking in the room, the familiar furniture in new positions, the view, the organized shelves. He seemed to be looking for something, perhaps signs of manipulation or disorder. He found only calm order. "This is nice," he said, his voice quiet. "It's bright." "It is," I agreed. I did not offer to take his coat. He wore none. "You may sit." He placed the orchid on the coffee table and lowered himself into the armchair across from the sofa. I sat on the sofa, facing him. The distance between us was a few feet, but it felt continental. Silence stretched. He looked at his hands, then at the floor, then finally at me. "I'm not here to argue," he began, "or to ask for anything. I've spoken to a lawyer. Mr. Daniels sent copies of everything. It's airtight." "I know it is," I said. "I know you know." He took a breath. "I'm here to apologize, a real apology, not a strategic one." He struggled for words, a man who dealt in figures now grappling with intangibles. "What you said at the party about me seeing you as a line item, about the referral fee." He flushed, a deep red of shame. "I did inquire. Golden Years Haven has a program, a finder's fee for financial advisors who refer clients. It's not illegal, but it's—" He couldn't finish. "It is a conflict of interest," I supplied, my voice neutral. "It monetized your concern." He nodded, looking ill. "When you said it out loud in front of everyone, I saw it through their eyes. I saw what I'd become." He looked up, and his eyes were genuinely pained. "I told myself I was doing the right thing, the safe thing. But the truth is, I saw the house, the equity, the growing value, and I saw my own future. My retirement, my kids' college tied up in it. I convinced myself that moving you was about care, but it was about control. And liquidity." He stated it plainly, without excuse. This was the reckoning. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "The documents are signed, the matter is settled." "Because the matter isn't settled for me," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I lost my mother before I even moved her. I traded a relationship for a potential asset, and I lost both. I've spent the last week replaying every conversation, every suggestion I made. You were right. I was conducting a feasibility study on my own mother." He shook his head, as if trying to dispel the thought. "I am so ashamed." I watched him. The anger I had carried for months did not vanish, but it shifted. It cooled from a burning coal into a heavy, settled stone. This was not the defiant son from the party. This was a man who had seen his reflection and flinched. "What do you want, Marcus?" I asked, not unkindly but directly. "I don't know if I can have what I want," he said. "I want my mother back, but I understand I broke that. I'm not asking you to change the trust or anything else. That's your decision, and I respect it. I'm asking if it's possible to have a place in your life, any place you're willing to allow, as a guest, as someone who visits on your terms." The humility in the request was foreign to him. It was awkward, unpracticed. That made it feel more genuine. "You accused me of being manipulated, of not thinking clearly," I reminded him. "I was wrong," he said immediately. "You were the clearest thinker in the room. You saw the end game before I'd even finished setting up the board. I was the one who wasn't thinking clearly. I was thinking like a spreadsheet." I considered him. The potted orchid on the table was a peace offering, not a negotiation tool. His posture was defeated, not defensive. This was the first step in any possible future, the unqualified admission of fault. "My terms are non-negotiable," I said. "This is my home. I decide my life. You may visit with notice. We may have lunch. We will not discuss my finances, my health, or my estate. Those subjects are closed, permanently." He nodded, a quick, eager movement. "I understand, I agree." "And you will need to rebuild trust. That will take time. It may never be fully rebuilt. You must accept that possibility." "I do," he said. "I'll accept whatever you're willing to give. I needed you to know that I see it now. What I did, who I became, and I'm sorry." I believed him. The apology was not for effect. It was the painful product of his own humiliation and self-reckoning. It did not erase the past, but it changed the texture of the present. "Thank you for the orchid," I said, gesturing to the plant. "It's very nice." It was a small acceptance, but his shoulders relaxed minutely. "You're welcome." "Would you like a glass of water?" I asked. "Yes, thank you." I stood and went to the kitchen. I filled 2 glasses from the tap. The ordinary action in my new space felt significant. When I returned and handed him a glass, our fingers did not touch. He took a sip, then set it down. We did not talk about the past again. We spoke for 15 minutes about mundane things, his children's new school year, the unseasonably warm weather, the park outside my window. The conversation was stilted, but it was an attempt. When he finished his water, he stood. "I should let you get back to your day," he said. "All right." He walked to the door. He turned. "Would it be all right if I called you next week?" "You may," I said. He nodded, a look of profound gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, Mother." Then he was gone, closing the door softly behind him. I remained standing in the quiet living room. I looked at the orchid, its petals pure white against the green leaves. It was a fragile thing, requiring specific care to survive. I moved it to the windowsill where it would get indirect light. An apology was not reconciliation. It was just a seed. Whether it would grow into anything was uncertain and entirely up to me. For the first time in a long time, I felt not like a problem to be solved or an asset to be managed, but like a gardener. I would decide what to water and what to let wither. The power, finally and completely, was mine. The orchid from Marcus thrived on the windowsill. I watered it weekly, observing how the light fell across its petals in the afternoon. It was a quiet presence, a reminder that some things could be mended, albeit carefully and on new terms. He had called, as he said he would. We spoke for 20 minutes about nothing of consequence. The conversation was awkward but civil. It was a start, and I controlled its pace. 2 weeks after his visit, I decided it was time. The apartment no longer smelled of new paint and cardboard. It smelled of the lemon polish I used on my furniture and the faint, clean scent of the lilies Beverly had brought. My books were ordered on the shelves. My paintings hung straight. The space felt inhabited, claimed. It was ready to be shared. I invited a small group for a housewarming on a Sunday afternoon. There was no caterer this time. I prepared a platter of sandwiches, a salad, and a simple cake. Beverly arrived first, carrying a bottle of sparkling cider. Mr. Daniels came shortly after, looking pleased and slightly out of place without his suit jacket. Then came Ruth, Beverly's cousin from down the hall, who had become a friendly acquaintance. Margaret Evans arrived, her eyes bright with the pleasure of being included in the inner circle after her role as witness. Lastly, 3 of my former students came: David, now a city planner, Lena, a journalist, and James, who taught chemistry at our old high school. They were not children, but adults I respected, and whose respect I valued. The apartment was soon filled with the low hum of conversation and the clink of glasses. It was not the loud laughter of the birthday party, but a warmer, more substantive sound. People moved freely, examining my books, commenting on the view. There was no tension, no unspoken drama hovering in the corners. "You've made a lovely home here, Alina," Mr. Daniels said, standing beside me near the kitchenette. "Thank you, Franklin. I have peace of mind. That is the best foundation for any home." "Indeed it is." He sipped his cider. "The land trust is thrilled with the house. They have a young nurse and her family lined up to move in next month." A deep satisfaction settled within me. That was the correct ending for that story. After everyone had eaten, I picked up my glass. The conversations died down. All faces turned to me, expectant but relaxed. "I won't make a long speech," I began, "but I want to thank you all for being here. This gathering is different from the last one you attended for me." A ripple of knowing smiles went around the room. That was an ending. This is a beginning. I have learned that family is not merely a matter of blood or obligation. It is a matter of choice and of mutual respect. I looked at Beverly, my unwavering ally. At Franklin, my instrument of justice. At Margaret, the keeper of the community record. At my former students, the living testament to my life's work. At Ruth, a new friend in a new place. I chose this home, and today I am choosing to celebrate it with the people who have shown me, through their actions, what true care looks like. It looks like loyalty. It looks like legal rigor. It looks like gossip in the service of truth. Everyone laughed, and Margaret gave a proud little nod. It looks like former students who still call you principal. It looks like a cousin from down the hall who brings you soup when you have a cold. I raised my glass slightly higher. So, I toast to you, to chosen family, to new chapters written in our own hand, and to the profound peace that comes from knowing your own mind and owning your own life. "Hear, hear," Mr. Daniels said softly. To a leaner, Beverly proclaimed, and the others echoed her, their voices warm and solid in the room. We drank. The toast was not a challenge or a declaration of war. It was an affirmation. The revenge was not in the toast itself, but in the scene it crowned. I was not in a care home I despised, isolated and managed. I was in a home I owned, surrounded by people who valued me for my mind, my history, and my friendship. I was not a burden, I was a host. I was not an asset, I was a person. The party continued for another hour. Lena told a funny story about a disaster in my 9th grade English class. David talked about the plans for the community garden my endowment would fund. James promised to personally recommend candidates for the scholarship in my name. The talk was of the future, a future I had designed and funded and now inhabited. As the last guests left, thanking me and urging me to visit, Beverly stayed behind to help wash the few dishes. We worked in the comfortable silence of decades of friendship. When we were done, she dried her hands and looked at me. "You did it, completely." "I know," I said. "Are you happy?" I considered the question. I looked at the clean, quiet apartment, the empty glasses lined up on the counter, the orchid on the windowsill catching the last of the day's light. I felt the absence of dread, the presence of ease. "I am content," I said, "and contentment after a long period of siege is a profound form of happiness." She hugged me, a quick, strong embrace. "Then I'll see you for bridge on Thursday, here." "Yes, here." After she left, I was alone. The silence returned, but it was my silence. I walked to the window. The park below was empty now, the trees dark shapes against the twilight sky. In the reflection on the glass, I could see my apartment behind me, the ordered shelves, the comfortable chairs, the clock ticking steadily on the sideboard. My son's orchid was a white blur on the sill. I had lost a son's devotion, but I had reclaimed myself. I had lost a house, but I had gained a legacy that would outlive me in scholarships and gardens. I had exchanged the anxiety of being managed for the quiet authority of managing myself. The reflection in the window showed a woman standing straight in a space that was hers alone. No one was coming to move her. No one was coming to take over. The battle was over. The peace was real. I smiled, not at the reflection, but at the simple, hard-won truth of my situation. I was free, and that was the only victory that ever really mattered.